town of Red Creek believed they knew every man who rode through its dusty streets. They knew the gamblers by the cards tucked into their sleeves. They knew the drifters by the dirt on their boots. They knew the outlaws by the pistols hanging low on their hips. But no one knew Elijah Boone. Every morning before sunrise, he opened the blacksmith shop beside the church. He spoke little, worked slowly, charged fairly, never argued, never drank, never carried a revolver. The children liked him because he fixed broken toys without asking for money. Old ranchers liked him because his horseshoes never came loose. The women trusted him because he always lowered his hat respectfully when passing them. Some men mocked him. "Ain't much of a man," they whispered. "Never seen him throw a punch. I reckon he apologized if someone stole his horse." Elijah simply smiled, then went back to hammering a hot iron. His wife, Clara, laughed whenever she heard the gossip. They mistake peace for weakness. Elijah only shrugged. "Let them." She kissed his cheek. "I know who you are." He looked into her bright blue eyes and smiled. "And that's enough." Clara Boone was everything Elijah wasn't. She talked to strangers. She danced during town festivals. She convinced lonely widows to join quilting circles. She remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every child's favorite candy. If Elijah was the mountain, Clara was the river flowing around it. The people loved her. One hot July afternoon, the church bell rang wildly. Dust clouds appeared on the eastern trail. 8 riders entered town. Every horse wore a black tack. Every man carried 2 revolvers. Shotguns hung from their saddles. At their head rode Silas Crow. His reputation traveled faster than he did. He robbed banks, burned ranches, killed sheriffs, left survivors only when fear served him better than bullets. Sealers smiled as townsfolk hurried indoors. Afternoon. Nobody answered. The outlaw laughed. I asked for a greeting. Still silence. He nodded toward one of his men. A rifle fired. The church bell shattered. Glass rained into the street. Children screamed. Sealers grinned. That's better. Sheriff Amos stepped onto the boardwalk. His badge looked too small against the fear in his eyes. What do you want? Sealers removed his hat politely. Supplies. You pay. Sealers laughed so hard he nearly fell from his horse. No. Within minutes the gang emptied stores. Food. Whiskey. Blankets. Ammunition. Anyone who resisted received a rifle butt across the face. No one fought. Except Clara. She watched one outlaw shove an elderly woman into the dirt. Without thinking, Clara slapped him. The crack echoed through the street. Everything stopped. The outlaw slowly touched his cheek. Sealers turned. Well. He smiled. Ain't she spirited? Elijah had been inside the forge. The hammer stopped. He heard Clara's voice. He walked outside calmly. His hands were black with soot. His leather apron still hung around his waist. He saw Clara standing before 8 armed killers. She wasn't afraid. Only angry. Sealers noticed Elijah approaching. You her husband? Elijah nodded once. She ought to learn respect. Clara glared. You ought to learn manners. Several gang members laughed. Sealers didn't. He rode closer until his horse stood inches away. You gonna make me? Clara stared directly into his eyes. No, someone eventually will. Sealers looked toward Elijah. You gonna stop her talking? Elijah simply placed a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder. Come home. She frowned. But, please. His voice stayed soft. She sighed. Fine. They turned away. The entire town watched, waiting. Surely the husband would say something. Do something. Instead, he walked home beside his wife. Sealers burst into laughter. Look at him. The quiet husband. His gang joined in. Coward. Blacksmith ain't got no backbone. One outlaw picked up a rock and threw it. It struck Elijah's shoulder. He never turned around. More laughter. That evening Red Creek whispered about Elijah Boone. I would have fought. I die before walking away. What kind of husband lets another man insult his wife? No one noticed Clara wasn't embarrassed. She sat on their porch drinking coffee, watching the sunset. Elijah joined her. You angry? She smiled gently. No. You understand why I walked away. I married you. She squeezed his hand. I understand everything. For a long time they watched the sky turn orange, then purple, then black. After midnight, dogs began barking. Horses panicked. The Boone farmhouse exploded with splintering wood. 4 masked riders smashed through the front door. Clara screamed. Elijah woke instantly. One outlaw slammed a rifle stock across his head. Another pinned his arms. Sealer stepped inside carrying a lantern. I've been thinking about your wife. Clara spat in his face. He smiled. I like courage. He wiped his cheek. I think I'll keep her. 2 men dragged Clara toward the horses. She fought like a wildcat. Kicked. Bit. Scratched. Screamed Elijah's name. He struggled beneath 3 armed men. Blood poured down his forehead. Sealers leaned close. You should have entertained me today. He kicked Elijah in the ribs. You just sat there. Another kick. You'll sit there now too. The gang rode away, taking Clara, leaving Elijah lying in the dirt. By sunrise, the sheriff arrived with half the town. They found Elijah still kneeling beside the broken front porch, silent, holding Clara's wedding ring. Sheriff Amos placed a hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry. Elijah didn't answer. A rancher spoke. They're gone. Another sighed. Nothing anyone can do. One man muttered. Should have fought yesterday. Elijah slowly stood, walked inside, closed the door. No one saw him for the rest of the day. The town believed he was broken. They were wrong. Because hidden beneath loose floorboards, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, lay 2 worn Colt revolvers, a weathered cavalry holster, and a faded photograph of 5 young men standing beside army horses. Only one remained alive. His name was Elijah Boone. And 30 years earlier, entire outlaw gangs had whispered another name. The ghost of Black Mesa. Morning sunlight crept across the broken floorboards of Elijah Boone's cabin, revealing splintered furniture, shattered windows, and dark stains of dried blood. The little house that had always been filled with Clara's laughter now echoed with silence. Outside, The people of Red Creek gathered in uneasy clusters. They wanted to help, but none dared follow Sealer's Crow and his gang into the Badlands. Every man in the territory knew the Crow gang. They had murdered marshals, robbed trains, and burned entire ranches. Chasing them was considered suicide. Sheriff Amos knocked gently on the door. Elijah. No answer. He pushed the door open. The cabin was empty. The floorboards near the fireplace had been pried loose. A small wooden box lay open. Inside remained only old army buttons, a rusted cavalry badge, and a folded piece of paper yellowed with age. The weapons that had once rested inside were gone. Sheriff Amos frowned. What in God's name? Miles away, Elijah rode alone through the early morning mist. He wore the same plain brown coat he always had, but the blacksmith's leather apron was gone. Strapped across his waist were two old Colt revolvers polished until they gleamed like mirrors. Behind his saddle hung a Winchester rifle wrapped in canvas. His face was calm. Not angry. Not emotional. Simply focus. For the first time in decades, Elijah Boone looked like the man he used to be 25 years earlier. Before Red Creek. Before Clara. Before peace. The frontier had known another Elijah. Young soldiers whispered stories around campfires about a cavalry scout who could outshoot entire squads. They said he never missed. They said he never fired first. But when he did, the fight ended before anyone realized it had begun. His commanding officer once told him, "A fast gun wins duels, a calm gun wins wars." Elijah never forgot those words. He survived dozens of battles. He buried every friend he had ever made. By the time the wars ended, he was tired. Not wounded. Not defeated. Simply tired of killing. So he buried his name with his uniform. He became a blacksmith. Then he met Clara. She never asked about the scars on his shoulders. She never questioned why loud noises sometimes woke him before sunrise. She simply accepted the quiet man standing before her. That acceptance had saved him. Until Sealer's Crow arrived. Meanwhile, Clara sat inside an abandoned mining camp hidden deep in Black Rock Canyon. Her wrists were tied, but her spirit remained untouched. Sealer's Crow entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered one. She refused. "You're wasting your kindness," she said. He laughed. "Kindness. I've seen wolves smile before they bite." Sealers nodded approvingly. "I like you. I don't care." He sat across from her. "Your husband disappointed me." "He disappointed your pride." Sealers smirked. He looked afraid. Clara smiled. "No." He walked away. He chose peace. Sealers leaned closer. "Peace is weakness." Clara met his eyes. "No, peace is strength." His smile faded. "You still believe he'll come?" "I know he will." Sealers laughed so hard tears formed in his eyes. "One man." She answered quietly. "One is enough." The gang outside heard the laughter. One outlaw shook his head. "She still believes in that blacksmith." Another replied, "I almost feel sorry for her." An older outlaw named Briggs remained silent. He had spent 30 years riding with different gangs. He recognized something about Elijah Boone. Something familiar. Something dangerous. Finally he spoke. "I've seen that man before." The others laughed. "In Red Creek." No. Where? Briggs frowned. Long ago. You're imagining things. No. He rubbed his beard. I remember those eyes. Sealers overheard. You know him. Briggs hesitated. I don't know. Either you do or you don't. There was a cavalry scout once. Sealers rolled his eyes. Old soldier stories. They called him. Briggs searched his memory. The ghost. Sealers burst into laughter. You're scared of an old blacksmith. Briggs looked toward the canyon entrance. I've learned something. What? The quiet ones usually survive the longest. Sealers waved dismissively. He won't even find us. By noon Elijah reached a lonely trading post. The owner looked up from feeding horses. Well, I'll be. Elijah Boone. The old trader blinked twice. I haven't seen you armed in 25 years. Elijah nodded. I need supplies. The trader disappeared inside. When he returned, he carried a box of rifle cartridges. I've been saving these. He remembered. I remember everything. Elijah reached for his wallet. The trader pushed his hand away. No charge. Elijah. The old man's voice grew quiet. I heard about your wife. Elijah lowered his head. I'll bring her home. I know you will. As Elijah prepared to leave, another rider approached from the north. He wore a faded marshal's badge. His beard had turned white. His shoulders stooped with age. He stared at Elijah for several moments. Then recognition spread across his face. Boone. Elijah looked carefully. Thomas. The old marshal smiled. I thought you were dead. So did most people. Thomas climbed down from his horse. You vanished after Fort Carson. I wanted a different life. The marshal noticed the Colts hanging at Elijah's side. So it's true. What? You're riding again. Elijah nodded once. They took Clara. Thomas's smile disappeared. Who? Sealers Crow. The old marshal inhaled sharply. You can't go alone. I already am. There are 12 men with Crow now. I counted 8 in town. He picked up 4 more yesterday. Elijah simply adjusted his saddle. Thomas placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. I've seen what you can do. I hope I don't have to do it again. Late that afternoon, Elijah found the gang's trail. Most riders would have followed the deep hoof prints. Elijah ignored them. Instead he studied broken grass, bent sagebrush, tiny drops of spilled coffee, a snapped tree branch. He smiled faintly. They are trying to hide. Old habits returned effortlessly. Every lesson from his cavalry days awakened. He rode slower, listening more than looking, watching birds, watching dust, watching shadows. Near sunset he dismounted beside a creek. He touched the water. Still warm. Someone had crossed less than an hour earlier. He examined the mud. 12 horses. One woman walking barefoot for a short distance before being forced back onto his saddle. His jaw tightened. They're close. At the outlaw camp, Clara secretly loosened one of the ropes around her wrist against a jagged rock. Every movement was careful. Every second counted. She overheard Briggs arguing with Sealers. We should move. Sealers scoffed. From one man. Yes. You've gone soft. No. Briggs looked toward the canyon entrance again. I've simply lived long enough to recognize danger. Sealers poured himself another drink. If Elijah Boone rides into this canyon, he grinned confidently, he'll die before he reaches the first campfire. High above them, unseen among the rocks, a lone hawk circled silently, and from an overlooking ridge, another pair of calm eyes studied every movement in the camp below. Elijah Boone had already arrived. He counted the guards, measured the distances, marked every horse, memorized every escape route. Then, as darkness settled over Black Rock Canyon, the quiet husband whispered only 4 words to himself. Bring her home, alive. The hunt had begun. The moon hung high above Black Rock Canyon, casting silver light across jagged cliffs and twisted pines. The Crow gang had made camp in the ruins of an old mining settlement. Their horses were tied in a loose circle, rifles leaned against crates, and a large fire crackled in the center. Sealer's Crow sat with a whiskey bottle in one hand, laughing loudly as his men swapped stories of robberies and gunfights. Only one man wasn't laughing. Briggs. The old outlaw kept glancing toward the darkness beyond the campfire. Every strange sound, a distant owl, a shifting rock, the whisper of wind through dry grass made him uneasy. You hear something? One of the younger outlaws asked. Briggs shook his head. I hear nothing. The outlaw laughed. Then why do you look so nervous? Briggs answered quietly. Because men like Elijah Boone don't announce themselves. High above the canyon, Elijah lay motionless behind a line of weathered boulders. His Winchester rested across his forearms. His breathing was slow, steady. He watched every guard. 1 man circled the horses. 2 sat near the supplies. Another leaned against a wagon, half asleep. Elijah had spent decades as a blacksmith, but his soldiers' instincts had never disappeared. He didn't rush. He waited. Because patience had kept him alive, when speed alone would have gotten him killed. He whispered to himself the words his old captain had repeated countless times. The first shot is only important if it's the right one. Near midnight, the guard by the horses wandered away to refill his coffee. It was the opening Elijah had been waiting for. Without making a sound, he slid down the rocky slope. His boots found every patch of soft earth, avoiding loose stones. Within seconds he reached the horses. Instead of stealing one, he quietly untied every single rein. Then he slapped the nearest horse on its flank. The startled animal bolted into the darkness. The others followed in panic. Within moments the entire herd thundered through the canyon. Men leaped to their feet. My horse. They are getting away. Catch them. Half the gang ran after the stampede. Exactly as Elijah had planned. Sealers cursed. Idiots, get them back. Only 6 armed men remained in camp. Elijah smiled faintly. The odds had just improved. Clara heard the chaos outside. She had nearly worked one hand free from the ropes binding her wrists. She knew Elijah was close. Not because she had seen him. Because everything happening outside felt deliberate. Nothing was random. That was Elijah. He never wasted movement. Never wasted bullets. Never wasted chances. Outside the camp, one outlaw stopped suddenly. I thought I saw someone. Another laughed. You saw shadows. The first man turned. There. A figure stood among the trees. Tall. Still. Hat pulled low. The outlaw raised his rifle. Who's there? The figure didn't move. He fired. The rifle blast echoed across the canyon. When the smoke cleared, the figure was gone. Only a tree trunk remained. The outlaw frowned. What? A calm voice spoke behind him. You missed. He spun around. Too late. The butt of Elijah's rifle struck his temple. The outlaw collapsed without another sound. Elijah caught the falling rifle before it hit the ground. No unnecessary noise. Back at camp, Silas frowned. That shot wasn't supposed to happen. Briggs slowly stood. He's here. Sealers scoffed. You don't know that. Briggs looked into the darkness. I do now. Another outlaw searched between the rocks with their lantern. Come out. Silence. You hear me. Still nothing. He stepped forward. A pebble rolled beneath his boot. He looked down. Fresh footprints. Before he could react, a hand covered his mouth. Another pulled him backward into the shadows. The lantern hit the ground. Its flame flickered once. Then darkness swallowed it. One by one, the gang realized something was terribly wrong. Men stopped answering when called. Footsteps vanished. Rifles disappeared. No gunfire. No screams. Only silence. Sealers gripped his revolver tighter. This isn't possible. Briggs answered. It is if the stories were true. Sealers glared at him. What stories? The ghost of Black Mesa. Briggs stared into the fire as memories returned. I was 19 when I first heard the name. No one ever saw him draw. They only heard the shots. 5 bandits once ambushed a cavalry patrol. They thought they had easy prey. They found 4 dead before they even knew the fight had started. The 5th surrendered. Sealers rolled his eyes. Campfire tales. Briggs shook his head. No. I met the survivor. He said the scout never looked angry. He looked disappointed. Sealers laughed loudly to hide the unease growing inside him. So the famous ghost became a blacksmith. No. Briggs replied. He became a husband. And that's far more dangerous. Inside the cabin, Clara finally slipped one hand free. She stayed perfectly still. The guard outside was only a few feet away. If she moved too soon, everything would be lost. She remembered Elijah teaching neighborhood children how to shoe horses. One little boy had asked him, "What's the hardest part?" Elijah had smiled, waiting. Only now did Clara truly understand. Outside, Elijah reached the edge of the camp. Only 4 armed men remained near Sealers. He rested behind an abandoned oak cart. His Winchester rose slowly. A lantern illuminated one outlaw's chest. Elijah squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The lantern exploded. Darkness swallowed the camp. Panic erupted. Where's he shooting from? I can't see. Spread out. The worst possible order. Separated men were easier to defeat. Sealers shouted. Stay together. But fear travels faster than commands. One outlaw fired wildly into the trees. Another emptied his revolver at shadows. Bullets shattered rocks and branches. Elijah didn't fire again. He moved. Calmly. Methodically. Invisible between flashes of muzzle fire. Each frightened shot revealed another outlaw's position. Each position became another advantage. Within minutes, only 3 men still stood beside Sealers. The canyon had become terrifyingly quiet. Then a voice emerged from the darkness. Soft. Calm. Unmistakable. Sealers. The outlaw froze. Show yourself. I already have. Sealers spun in every direction. Nothing. No movement. Only darkness. You came for your wife? Yes. You'll die trying. No. Elijah's voice remained steady. You already chose who dies. For the first time in many years, Sealer's crow felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not because he had seen Elijah, but because he couldn't. Somewhere beyond the firelight, the quiet blacksmith watched every move he made. The hunter had become the hunted. And before dawn, Black Rock Canyon would witness the deadliest gunfight anyone left alive would ever remember. A cold wind swept through Black Rock Canyon. The campfire had burned down to glowing embers, casting long shadows across the abandoned mining camp. The laughter that had filled the canyon only hours earlier had vanished. The silence now felt heavier than any gunfire. Sealer's crow stood with his revolver drawn, turning slowly in a circle. His remaining men huddled close together, their eyes darting toward every shadow. No one spoke. No one dared. Because somewhere in the darkness, Elijah Boone was watching. Briggs finally broke the silence. Sealers. What? We've already lost. Sealers glared at the old outlaw. He is one man. Briggs shook his head. No. He's one man with purpose. There isn't a more dangerous thing in this world. Inside the cabin, Clara loosened the final knot around her wrists. She rubbed the circulation back into her hands but stayed perfectly still. She knew Elijah. If he had come this far, he had a plan. Trust him. That was all she had to do. Outside, one nervous outlaw could no longer bear the silence. He fired wildly into the darkness. Another followed. Then another. The canyon erupted with random gunshots. Echoes bounced from cliff to cliff until no one could tell where these shots had come from. When the echoes faded, a calm voice spoke. You've emptied half your ammunition. The outlaws froze. Sealers recognized the voice instantly. Elijah. You think hiding makes you strong? Sealers shouted. No. Elijah answered her. Knowing when not to shoot does. Sealers smiled cruelly. Come out, Boone. I'll make it quick. A long pause followed. Then Elijah replied, You had your chance yesterday. You mistook mercy for fear. Sealers laughed. I watched you walk away. You let everyone think you were weak. I chose peace, Elijah said. You chose pride. They aren't the same. Before Sealers could answer, a single rifle shot echoed through the canyon. The lantern beside one outlaw exploded. Glass showered the ground. The frightened man spun toward the flash, and Elijah stepped from behind a stone wall. Everything happened in less than 2 seconds. His right hand moved first. The first Colt cleared leather. A single shot knocked the outlaw's revolver from his hand. Before the weapon even hit the dirt, his left Colt fired. A second outlaw's rifle flew into the air. The remaining gunman raised his shotgun. Elijah pivoted. A third shot shattered the shotgun's wooden stock before it could fire. Sealers stared in disbelief. He had never seen anyone move that fast. Not once had Elijah aimed for a man. only for their weapons. Briggs slowly smiled. I told you. The stories didn't do him justice. He quietly laid his own revolver on the ground. I'm done. Elijah nodded once. Walk away. Without another word, Briggs turned and disappeared into the dawn. He had spent his life serving outlaws. He would not die for one. Now only sealers remained. The two men stood 30 feet apart. The eastern sky had begun to glow with the first light of sunrise. No one moved. The canyon itself seemed to hold its breath. Sealers twirled his revolver confidently. I've killed marshals. I've killed bounty hunters. I've never lost a duel. Elijah's expression never changed. But this isn't a duel. Sealers frowned. What is it? A husband bringing his wife home. Sealers' smile faded. You really loved her that much? Elijah answered without hesitation. More than my own life. For the first time, Sealers understood. He had kidnapped the wrong woman. Not because she was important. Because she was loved. Deeply. Completely. Without condition. Farah quietly opened the cabin door. She stepped outside unnoticed. She could see Elijah standing in the center of the camp. He never looked toward her. His eyes never left Sealers. He trusted her to stay safe. Just as she trusted him to finish this. Sealers suddenly lunged sideways. His revolver flashed from its holster. The shot thundered across the canyon. Almost at the same instant, two quieter shots answered. Sealers' bullet struck the brim of Elijah's hat, tearing away a strip of leather. Elijah's first bullet shattered Sealers' revolver. His second struck the large silver belt buckle at Sealers' waist, knocking him backward into the dirt. The outlaw gasped, staring in disbelief. He wasn't dead. He was alive. Again. Elijah had chosen not to kill. Sealers looked up. Why? You had the chance. Elijah slowly walked toward him. When I was young, I believed every problem could be solved with a faster draw. He stopped a few feet away. Oh. Then I watched too many good men die. So I buried that life. Sealers coughed. And yet, you came back. No. Elijah shook his head gently. I came for my wife. There's a difference. Sheriff Amos and a posse of ranchers rode into the canyon just as the sun cleared the horizon. They stopped in amazement. Around the camp lay disarmed outlaws, abandoned rifles, and frightened horses. Not a single innocent person had been harmed. Sheriff Amos climbed down from his horse. It's over. Elijah nodded. It is now. The sheriff looked at Sealers. You under arrest. Sealers didn't resist. For the first time in his life, he lowered his head. Clara walked slowly toward Elijah. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She simply reached up and straightened the torn brim of his hat. He ruined it, she whispered with a smile. Elijah laughed softly. I know. She wrapped her arms around him. I never doubted you'd come. I know. You took your time. I had to make sure you came home. She smiled through tears. You always think of everything. Several townspeople who had followed the sheriff stood silently nearby. One of the ranchers finally spoke. We all thought you were afraid. Elijah looked toward the rising sun. I was. They stared in confusion. Here. He nodded. I was afraid that if I became the man I used to be, I'd never find my way back. Weeks later, Red Creek slowly returned to normal. The blacksmith's hammer rang through the town once again. Children gathered outside the forge to watch sparks fly. Clara filled the porch with flowers brighter than ever before. Travelers occasionally stopped and asked an old question. Is it true the ghost of Black Mesa lives here? The townsfolk would smile. Never heard of him. There's only Elijah Boone, the quiet blacksmith. Sometimes newcomers laughed. That old fellow. He doesn't even carry a gun. The older residents would exchange knowing glances. No, he doesn't. And no one ever explained why outlaws stopped avoiding sheriffs and started avoiding Red Creek instead. Because legends are often loud, but the greatest among them leave behind only peace. Elijah Boone had never wanted to be remembered as the fastest gun in the West. He wanted to be remembered as a good husband. In the end, that was the only title that ever mattered. The end.